So welcome back to Business and Bubble Tea. We are delighted to have Jack Bowen with us today, the co-founder of Genei and CoLoop, both of which utilize artificial intelligence. The first one focusing more on facilitating academic research papers, and the second one on qualitative market research. So welcome, Jack. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
But maybe due to the complexity of the product and the novelty as well, maybe you could also just put it in your own words, how you would explain what each of these tools actually do.
Yeah, so Genei, we built to solve a problem we had when we were students, which is essentially the high time cost of conducting literature review. So reading through very long academic papers and kind of synthesizing the key points from them. CoLoop was a new product we launched around 15 months ago. And the idea with CoLoop is that it helps qualitative researchers conduct content analysis much more efficiently so they can focus their efforts on improving the quality, the strategy, and the interpretation and thinking behind the reports and outputs that they generate from analyzing that content.
Oh, that's really nice. And I can imagine that it's like an idea like, I mean, looking at your professional path until now, we can guess that it came from your university. Am I right? I mean, I think you decided to make the decision of co-founding Genei straight out of graduating from the University of Oxford, which is where you are graduated, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe it would be nice to know a little bit about this context. Were there any words when you decided to make this route instead of the more convenient, more traditional job hunt? Is there one develop on that?
Yeah, so I think to address your first point there around why specifically we address these ideas, I think it's a long, arduous journey getting to a point where you've built something that's useful that people derive value from, and so I think you really need to work on something that you care a lot about. That's easy to do if it's a problem that you've experienced and has frustrated you for a long time. So Genei, the frustration that we'd all experienced was the fact that we were doing masters and had a lot of literature that we had to review. Now, with CoLoop, that kind of, again, was born out of our own experiences. While we were developing Genei, one thing we really struggled with was kind of finding product market fit and really developing an effective product strategy. A lot of the work that we were doing to remedy that involved talking to a lot of our customers and really trying to deeply understand who they were, what their problems were, how they fitted into our ICP, or for ones who we felt did fit into our ICP, what we needed to do to improve our product. And so that's where we really fell in love with qual and trying to understand human behavior and all these different techniques for really just getting inside the science of decision making and behavior and answering questions about why people do the things that they do. In terms of the decision to go and do a startup straight out of uni, I think I was previously involved a little bit in various sort of startup and entrepreneurial efforts. Back when I was at school, I remember developing little mobile apps, basically games and things, which I quite enjoyed. And I think for me, it felt like quite a natural decision to go and do that. A lot of the corporate jobs that colleagues and friends were heading off to, I think for me, didn't feel hugely appealing. They didn't capture my interest as as much as kind of continuing to pursue this sort of entrepreneurial route. So that's the path they went down. In terms of the decision and I suppose what that meant, I think it was very simple in the beginning. I think as we got further into it, certainly in the first sort of year, there was a lot of, I remember, kind of existential thinking as it all became quite real, about whether this had been the right decision. I think it's quite simple when you're a student and you sit on top of your loan money or whatever, and you don't really worry about paying costs or hanging out with friends or being able to afford to go to the pub. I think once you're paying rent and working on this thing full time, suddenly it all becomes quite real. And so I think definitely in that initial year there were a lot of moments where I think I definitely thought quite hard about it. To be honest, I think that those sort of experiences form a lot of the hunger and the motivation that really makes you press on. I don't know if I would have worked quite as hard as I did if I didn't feel like there were bills to pay and something to deliver on, ultimately that enforce that kind of limit. One other thing I just add to that as well is that I think the fact that we launched it around the time that COVID happened potentially made things a bit easier. I think there was something about that period, particularly with the lockdown, that really took a lot of pressure off of getting on and, and figuring out what you wanted to do. So many people's job starts, PhD programs, etc., all deferred or delayed. And I think that kind of year, in a sense, gave this sort of breathing space that meant I felt much more comfortable to continue and feel as though, no one was really doing anything or getting very much done this year anyway. So it felt like a good sort of green open space to try out something a bit more risky.
Okay, no, so the motivation of actually coming out of university is really a big Kickstarter. I can imagine that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would actually like to circle back to something you said, because you did mention you were already involved in the entrepreneurial scene during your school time and then later on at university as well, and participated quite successfully in some startup programs. In what sense do you perhaps think this might have shaped your idea of entrepreneurship? And is there perhaps also one piece of advice that you're now thinking back to and can see more value in, or like really think that was one piece of advice that helped you through those hard first couple of months?
Yeah, I think in terms of how it shaped my experience, there were several experiences I had that really embedded my interest in doing something like this. The first one I would say was probably one of the kind of early attempts I made at launching a little mobile app. I made a game, and I managed to put it out on the App Store, and a few of my friends downloaded it, and then they were using it and it was cool, and people were suggesting ways to make it better and showing me all of the many bugs that it had and things that needed to be fixed. But they took an interest, and that was great. It felt cool that that people were taking something that I'd built and actually using it. I had a similar experience as well. There was another guy I was at uni with who also started a payments company in his final year, and I think, again, just walking around the university town and kind of seeing people using this payments app to buy coffee or buy drinks or whatever, and just seeing this thing proliferate, this piece of software that materialized out of the ether after all this guy's efforts, just actually getting used by people, was really, really exciting. And then I suppose the other thing as well, is eventually with this mobile game, I put an advert banner in there, as you do, and I launched that, and I got set up with Google AdWords, and I remember waking up, about a week or so later and discovering that it was actually trickling money into my bank account. And, I thought for a second, that's crazy. I've launched this thing. It took a long time to build, etc. People are actually using it, and you can make money doing this. It's sustainable, and you can use that to grow it and make it better and build other things. So I think those were two quite sort of formative experiences. I think in terms of pieces of advice that really kept me going, I think with that, to be honest, it's one thing that really helped was understanding the reality that other successful founders had been through. There's that kind of joke that it only takes 5 years or whatever for an overnight success. And I think there are so many products and services that we use today where people just assume that they just spewed forth this perfectly formed product. And what you don't see is the years of headbanging, iteration, pivoting from terrible ideas to eventually getting to something that works. And I think if you engage with the less glamorous side of what that looks like, I think you kind of develop a much more useful sense of the realities of doing it. And so when you're sitting there feeling like nothing's working and it's all falling apart, then actually what you realize is that that's part of the journey and it's normal. And if you keep plowing through that, there's something good on the other side. I remember listening to the How I Built This podcast, and that being a really great source of a lot of these stories. The Airbnb founders, for instance, at one point were selling cereal. Later on, they couldn't raise money for a round, and so they ended up maxing out a bunch of credit cards to try and continue financing this ludicrous idea that they were working on. I think the more you dig into those, the the more sort of fortifying it is to just hear how many times successful people failed and how many times you have to really try in order to get anywhere.
Yeah, that's actually it's a pretty good example, I think, like of the journey that you're presenting. I think it's actually I think it would be interesting to see how this journey shaped you, because if I don't mistaken, as you already mentioned, CoLoop is actually a second idea of yours. It generated from your initial startup, Genei. So would you be able to just clarify a bit how this whole journey started and how you went from one startup to the other? Like, because at first we wanted to know a little bit how you handled this kind of transition. What was the main reasoning? Why did you change product or project? I think that's a very interesting thing to see.
Yeah, so I think going through a pivot was definitely one of the hardest things that we did. If our first product had just not worked, it would have been a lot easier. The reality is we launched this thing and it still, to this day, has many users who are, using Genei. It's still a great product. The reason it wasn't working for us was because it didn't have the kind of venture scale potential that we were looking for. And so I think one of the really difficult things about that wasn't the fact that we were working on something that hadn't worked, because it kind of was working. It was really letting go of all the stuff that we built. I mean, it had a lot of revenue running through it. It'd taken a lot of hours of our time and in fact years to build this thing. And so I think going through that sort of pivot journey was really, really difficult. And I think for me, I remember watching a lot of different videos and content about this stuff and opportunity cost and all the rest of it. And I think what crystallized for me that made that a whole lot easier was just kind of looking around at certain companies. I remember looking at Jasper AI. Jasper AI is a content writing tool. They scaled to $1 billion valuation in something insane, like 18 months. And I think what that kind of made me realize was that, the defining characteristic of a up-and-coming startup is incredibly rapid growth. And given that that's the case, the decision to pivot is easier if you feel like there is a better opportunity out there, because if you're correct about that, the time taken to get back to where you are today should be very, very short. And so I think that was the point where I got a lot more comfortable with it. We've been riffing on this idea for a while. We spent hours and hours going through our own user research. And so we knew it was a problem. And I think for us, that's what clicked. And I think we also entered at a good time when AI and language models were like really starting to get performant enough to actually address this use case in a useful way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've been talking a lot about the team and trying to make this work, growing it, and you did keep on quite a large part of your initial founding team, I believe. But if you're now thinking about the journey of growth, what would you say are some perhaps key characteristics that you should be looking for perhaps in co-founders to actually go on this journey together?
Yeah, I think in terms of co-founders, I mentioned this earlier when we were kind of discussing just ahead of recording this. There's a blog, I think it's by Dalton or one of the other partners, YC, where they talk about co-founders, and they say that it's kind of like buying a house. You can change everything about your house except its location easily, and so picking your co-founders is really important. I think what's important there is that you choose to work with people who you're very aligned with. It's your life, it's their life. There aren't any right or wrong answers. We're trying to do what we think is best, and I think you need to make sure that the people that you choose to work with are ones who are going to align really well with that. The average time, I believe, and I might be wrong on this, but from what I remember, I believe the average time to take a company to IPO is something like 6 years. This is longer than the average amount of time that a marriage in the US will last. So when you think about picking your co-founders, arguably that is a more important decision than the person that you're going to marry. So it's really important to kind of consider that and realize that, especially when you sign contracts with someone and allocate equity, etc., that you are very legally tied in with those people. And so you need to make sure that you're really going to get along for a long time and that you're going to be the best fit for each other.
I actually love that comparison to really like show the severity of what could go wrong if you go.
I completely agree. It's basically like you're choosing a second family, I would imagine. But what I would be interesting to know, like, so yeah, you have to choose a house, and once the house is chosen, you can't really change the appearance. So I was very curious to know a little bit more about this meeting with your co-founders. Like, would you say that with your co-founders, you're very complementary, or like, do you think that you have some same qualities, or is it because you have very different strategies and qualities that it makes you go along very well in your work?
I think you definitely want to work with people where you have complementary skills, and that there's a level of intellectual honesty where you don't have anything to prove to each other, and if something's not working, you feel comfortable expressing that, and you can work through it as an issue. I think that, you know, definitely with your founding team, you're not going to have any employees to start with, so it's good that you have people who have a growth mindset, who can learn things and ideally cover the diversity of skills that you need. I think in the very first instance, the most kind of fundamental skills that are important, I would say, to having your founding team is someone who is very, very good at, you know, engineering, if it's a software company, and someone who's very, very good at selling. And I think that's kind of the minimum, I would say, that you need in order to get going. Some extremely talented people are capable of both. I think that having at least two is best, purely because for focus, you know, one of you can really work on the product while the other works on the customers and the selling. But yeah, I'd say that's the sort of, I would say that's the kind of most basic unit of kind of skill that you need in order to get anywhere.
Okay.
I think
that's a really, no, it's just an equilibrium. It's just, you have to make some complementary choices, and depending on the situation, you have the best solution. I get that.
I was overall on this point just wondering, because we've been talking about the transition from the first to the second company. Now, maybe after having gained all of this experience of founding a second time, do you think there's definitely something you would have done entirely different starting out the first time? And I mean, it's always easy to say in hindsight, oh, I could have done this better, but like perhaps something quite fundamental that you would approach very differently now that you have gained the experience twice.
Absolutely. I'm just going to qualify a question by saying that it is the same company with a different product. But to answer your point around what we would have done differently, everything. I think the first time around, there are so many things you just don't know, so many things you don't have any sense or intuition of. I think that if I had to pick one thing that I would say is really important, that I've learned and that I think is a really important quality, is the ability to basically sell before you build. I think a lot of people who are naive and haven't done it before, as we were in the beginning, think that the issue is that you don't have a product, and if you build this perfect thing that you're imagining, the people will just come and you'll be able to do all of the selling and that will fall in line. Selling something, I would say, is so fundamental and so difficult. I think that is, at least from my experiences, that's been the harder problem than actually engineering the best solution. Obviously, engineering a good solution is still very, very difficult, but I think for me, at least personally, the thing that I've always found to be most challenging is figuring out that go-to-market and managing to do that. And I think there are some really incredible examples of founders. The one I always bring up is the founder of Robinhood, who managed to get all the way to raising a very considerable seed round without actually ever building a product. And what they ended up doing was essentially just creating a website with a waiting list and testing out lots of different messaging and problem statements until they found one that really resonated with their target audience. And by doing that, they got so many people on board, were able to conduct so much research that they were able to not only raise a round, but also knew exactly what they needed to build in order to convert that huge waiting list into a huge list of customers. And I think on top of that, you know, had they done it the other way around, what probably would have happened is they would have spent a long time building the wrong thing and only discovered that right at the end when they launched it.
I mean, we could argue maybe that Robinhood could be a special case of having done essentially all of the selling first before actually developing something. On average, though, what would you say is like a bare minimum in terms of mock-up that should be present if you're kind of going down that road? Like the basic functionality, if we're putting it perhaps in percentage of the final product or like the intended product.
I think it really depends. It kind of comes down to what sort of company you're building. If it's a deep tech and there's something really fundamental that you're working on, I think it's a tall order to sell before you've delivered on that. If it's something that is highly product risked, so let's say for instance you are, I don't know, developing a cure to cancer. Marketing will not be a problem for that if you can develop it. The real challenge will be developing it. And so I think that's one extreme. And then I would say Robinhood perhaps exists at the other end where a lot of the work that brokers were doing was obviously quite automatable. It was going to be difficult, but it wasn't impossible to do. And so I think the real risk there was a market one around getting enough buy-in and getting those customers on board and getting them to use it. I think to answer your question, it's one of those things I think you probably is going to be highly situationally dependent. I've met founders who are on their third or fourth company now, and I think for individuals like that, to some extent, they have this legacy at this point of building very solid products for large audiences. And I think if you're that person, it's obviously easier to go to somebody and say, here's my sales deck, I can deliver on it, trust me, you can pay me this amount now and I'll deliver it in the future. I think if you're less convincing, less experienced, if the problem's harder, whatever it is, then you're going to need more of a proof point. But you would generally, I'd say, need a lot less than you think in order to get somebody on board if you've truly found a problem that they really care about.
I agree. I think you underlined something very useful, which I think is the power of network, like having the right people, creating yourself like a professional figure of yourself. That also helps a lot. Maybe this can help us to venture into another question that we had. We know that you had in your past had some relationship with some incubators or accelerators. Like I think you had participated in a program at the Y Combinator, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously the Y Combinator is one of the most popular, if not the most popular actually in the world as startup accelerators. My question would be very simple. Did this experience or any other experience similar to that one have any kind of impact on this ability for you to carry down your project?
Hugely. I think what Y Combinator did for us is basically explained how the game works in a way that we probably could have figured out for ourselves if we'd actually realized how important it was to understand that. I think it covered so many areas like product development, fundraising, all these different things. Honestly, all these anecdotes and things I'm telling you now are a huge derivative of that experience. And just watching lots of people who are incredibly competent, going to talks, having group sessions with incredibly experienced founders was just very important to basically develop that skill set and that sense for how this probably works and how it will basically go down if you make certain decisions. So I think YC was enormously impactful for what we did. I think that just as a way to expose us to a lot of different very talented people and see the way that they operate and what got them to where they are.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I mean, in this point, as we're talking of networks in general, I'd like to go into the geographics because I think you once said something very interesting when you said London was probably one of the only cities in the world that specifically allows you to do what you're doing right now. So what are perhaps the unique features of London as a startup hub for you and your company specifically that help you to also develop and grow it to the extent that it's going right now?
Yeah, I think there are definitely other places. Obviously, San Francisco, New York, massive hubs for venture activity. I think with London, the sort of characteristic of it for us really has been various sort of factors. Access to talent, networks, communities. My co-founder, for instance, now lives in a hacker house over in Maida Vale, where he basically lives in a house with, you know, 4 other startup founders, and, you know, they organize events. We go along to these things. We're able to continue networking, meeting interesting people, and continue to sort of exist in this environment where it doesn't feel like we're alone. And, you know, if something goes wrong, there are people who've probably had worse experiences who you can chat to, who came right in the end. And so I think it's probably, it really comes down, I think, to the people, the access to talent, the individuals that you meet while you're here, I think. And I think that's the kind of important defining characteristic. San Francisco is also similar in that it's just such a hub for folks who are working on their own ideas and starting their own companies that it's very inspiring. I think the other component here as well is also one of competition on a sort of personal level. You know, if you're a big fish in a small pond, I think it's easy to get complacent. I think part of the benefit of being in an environment where you are surrounded by talented and successful people is that you have something to benchmark yourself against, and you don't just think you're at the top of the tree straight away because you're, you know, somewhere where you know, somewhere smaller, somewhere where you're less aware of, I guess, the kind of what's possible and what other people have managed to do.
Yeah, I get that. So talking about changing ponds, I'm guessing that sooner or later you're going to go from the one pond to an ocean. So my idea would be, are you planning to go very international there, or like at one certain point of your project, or are you planning to stay more around the UK or the US? Are you planning maybe to, I don't know, I'm doing a wild guess here, to move east, or like join other ecosystems anywhere else? It's just as a general guess.
I think for us, I don't know. I don't know what right now it makes sense where we are. I think, you know, reasons for moving would probably be to get access to more talent, to be a small fish in a big pond, and to get closer to our customers potentially. I think that given the geographic location of where most of the market researchers are, you know, it's across US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India. That makes up more than 70% of the research industry, and also happens to cover a number of countries that have fantastic talent pools for engineers, salespeople, product designers. So I guess the answer is I don't know, but yeah, I suspect it would be if it was going to be one of those sort of places.
So it's already a very big pool. I'm sure you can find a lot of resources and development opportunities like that.
Yes.
And while we're also currently talking about future development, especially regarding your most recent product, CoLoop, you're currently drawing a lot of insights from hours of audio files that your tool is analyzing and drawing insights from. What do you think, and perhaps you can already see in customer inquiries, what the next most insightful factors could be? I believe you were once talking about tonality and perhaps using different interviewing means. That could be a next added bonus. Where could this be going, just out of interest?
Yeah, so I think right now at the moment, the research space is interesting in that the data formats and the different types of files people get through are incredibly varied. So depending on what sort of study you can be doing, it might be videos, it might be surveys, it might be responses from chatbots, it could be focus groups, interviews, ethnographic work, people filming things in their daily life or giving you vox pops. And so at the moment, I think we're really working on is kind of providing people with a platform and a layer where they can bring those different fragmented pieces together and conduct their analysis holistically. In terms of where I see things going and potential avenues, I think there's a huge range of different opportunities out there. I think that the macro trends that I find most interesting are really around scale, speed, frequency, really being able to run longer, deeper, faster research on some more questions. And so I think those are sort of areas that we're looking at. And then, of course, within that, things like other modalities. So allowing people to collect and analyze forms of data that have been historically very challenging. So, for instance, forms of video where there might not be speech, people using products and really trying to derive insights from all these other sources of information that have been very, very intractable historically, either due to their size or just the nature of what they are.
No, I mean, that's pretty, like, I think it's also even hard to grasp what the potential that we might be going in this direction is, because I think people are still having problems to even grasp what could be even included. I think even the aspects that you just mentioned of using visuals in a data tool are still pretty novel ideas in the corporate context as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the visual side of things is particularly interesting. One company I came across in the last few years is a company called Sensors that are actually applying computer vision to feeds from CCTV cameras and other sort of passive sources, and allowing people to derive insights from that sort of data. So,
Oh, wow.
for instance, lengths of queues in airports, or activity. If you perhaps run a restaurant, you can see when you're most busy based on these sources. And so I think what's really interesting about this whole movement is the amount of retrofitting and new life that can be breathed into forms of data collection that are just impenetrable at the moment because of the challenge of analyzing them.
That's a lot of data that it needs to be taken into account for, I can imagine. So coming back to the management and the governance of your project right now, would you think of yourself doing this kind of project long term? How long were you planning to have this company? Were you thinking eventually to keep it and keep growing it, or eventually to sell it off as an idea to exit and then do something else? Maybe it's a bit premature, but it would be very interesting to know a little bit how you would envision this possibility.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it is one that comes up occasionally. I think the answer for me that I've crystallized on is that it doesn't make a difference to the way that you basically decide your strategy. I think everyone probably has a price, whether it's $100 billion or $10,000 that you're going to sell your business for. It doesn't matter. The thing that is consistent, though, is anyone who's buying it is going to have to see a return on value in excess of what they're paying. And so if you sell your business, then there's got to be a plan in place and a strategy and a roadmap for how the individual buying it is going to accrue more value in the long run. And so I think for us, we're just focused on growing it, continuing to grow it in a sustainable, explosive way that allows us to continue scaling up and addressing the problem we're aiming to solve. So would I sell it one day? Maybe, if the price was right, but does it affect my day-to-day and what decisions I'm going to make? Not at all. I think that my goal is to keep growing this company and come what may.
It's good. Living on the present, I think, is the best option, I think, as an entrepreneur. I can imagine that.
Also sounds like a very good summary for me of this entire journey that we've just gone on keeping the growth alive and just taking it day by day, I think, as well. So I'm not sure if you have any more questions, Giancarlo, but
on my side, I think we run through a very wide spectrum of ideas. I think we have a very nice understanding of the whole business. I don't know if I think we're good. And if you have any conclusive statements that you want to share with us, we're happy to hear them all.
Yeah, I don't know. I think nothing in addition to what I've said, to be honest. I think that just that I've highs and lows, I've massively enjoyed the journey that we're on at the moment. And I think if anyone's out there thinking of starting their own business, then definitely check it out and make sure that you read up and you kind of arm yourself properly and really understand a lot of the prior art and more about successful founders who've come before. There are lots and lots of mistakes we made that we really didn't need to if we'd kind of watched the right videos and read the right blogs and heard from the right people. So don't be put off, but yeah, definitely do your research and make sure that you're spending your time well.
That's really a good statement to conclude this whole interview. Like, thank you very much for everything. I think on my side, I'm very, very happy to have had this conversation. I'm sure, Chiara, you as well. So
no, for sure. All that is left to say is really thank you so much for taking the time as well. And
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Anytime. And we're wishing you all the best for whatever's to come in terms of growth.
Thank you.
hope to see you soon.